Hello and welcome to Mathematics with Simon. I'm Simon. Today it's fractions 4, improper fractions, multiplication and division. So let's start with what's called improper fractions. So what are we to make of this? 7 over 3, 7/3. So we break an object into 3 equal parts and then take 7 of them. That seems a bit strange. This is why they're called improper fractions. But actually there's an easy way to understand this. We can look at it like this. So here we've got 7/3. We've got 3/3 here making a hole. Another 3/3 here making 2 holes. So that's 6 and then 1 more. So that's 7/3, 2 and 1/3. Okay, so we've got the general idea. Let's try some more. 12/4, 12 over 4. One way of thinking about this is really would you just divide 12 by 4, which is just 3. But again, we can imagine 3 pies, each cut into quarters. That's 12/4, so that's the same as 3. 17 over 5. So what do we think this is? So again, we divide 17 by 5. We get 3. And then we have 2 left over. So it's 2/5 left over. 3 and 2/5. 10 over 3. 10/3. So 3 goes into 10 3 times. And then we've got 1 left over, so it's 3 and 1/3. 17/8. 8 goes into 17 twice. So we've got 2 pies with 8 pieces in each, which makes 16. And then we've got 1 piece left over, so it's 2 and 1/8. 3 over 1. So this is 3 wholes. This looks a bit strange perhaps, but this is 3 wholes. So it's just 3. But this is useful because sometimes we need to write it like this when we're multiplying or dividing fractions. Okay, so moving on to multiplication of fractions, what do we think this is? 1/2 times 1/3. How are we going to understand this? Well, we can start by thinking about this, 2 times 3. So we all know how to do this. It's 2 lots of 3. So here are 2 lots of 3. Here's 1 lot of 3, and here are 2 lots of 3. 2 lots of 3 is 6. So in the same way, 1/2 times 1/3 is 1/2 of 1/3. That's a way of thinking about it. So 2 times 3 is 2 lots of 3. 1/2 times 1/3 is 1/2 of 1/3. So here's 1/3, and we're going to take half of it. And the way to take half of it is we split it in half, and then we have to split everything else in half. So we end up cutting the circle into 6ths. So this was the 1/3. Take 1/2 of it is here, which is 1/6. So 1/2 times 1/3 is 1/6, or 1/2 of 1/3 is 1/6. So let's look at another one. 1/3 times 1/4. Now we know what we're doing here. This is going to be 1/3 of 1/4. So here is 1/4 of the circle broken into thirds, and also the rest of the circle is divided up in the same sort of way. So we've put the circle into 12ths. So 1/4 was 3/12, but 1/3 of it is 1/12. So this is 1/3 of the quarter, which is 1/12. Okay, let's do another. 2/3 times 1/4. 2/3 times 1/4. And again, if this is, if you want to, please just pause the video while you're thinking about these, or just watch it. It's totally up to you. 2/3 times 1/4. 2/3 of 1/4. Here's the quarter broken into thirds, and the whole thing is broken in the same way. We're going to take 2 of those thirds, 2/3 here of the quarter. So that's 2/12, and we can cancel this down. 2/12 cancels down to 1/6 because we divide the top by 2 and the bottom by 2. There's a previous video on fractions that explains cancelling down. Fractions 3. And divide this by 2, divide this by 2, 1/6. What do we think this is? 5 times 1/8. Well, it's just going to be 5/8. But also, we can write it just one more way. 5 over 1 times 1/8. This might help us later on. But 5 over 1 times 1/8 is 5 over 8. So what we're going to do now is just look at all the different results that we've got. and try to understand a bit about what's going on. So what's going on is, well, what we see from the first one is, if you times the top two numbers together, you get the top number. If you times the bottom two numbers together, you get the bottom number. So 1 times 1 is 1, 2 times 3 is 6. So we would say if you multiply the numerators, you get the numerator. If you multiply the denominators, you get the denominator. Same here, 2 times 1 is 2, 3 times 4 is 12, and then we can cancel down. 1 times 1 is 1, 3 times 4 is 12. 5 times 1 is 5, 1 times 8 is 8. So this is the general rule. This is how we multiply fractions. We simply multiply the numbers on top, the numerators, and we multiply the numbers on the bottom, the denominators. And here's how we write it algebraically. So a over b times c over d equals a times c over b times d. That is the general sort of algebraic rule. So we've done multiplication. Now what about division? What do we think this is? A half divided by a quarter. We could say, how many quarters are there in a half? And all of a sudden this makes things feel a bit easier. How many quarters are there in a half? Well, here's a half. So we're going to see how many quarters we can find inside this half. We're going to chop it up, and we can see that a half is the same as 2 quarters. So a half divided by a quarter is going to be 2. Let's do another. 3 divided by a half. How many halves can we find inside 3 wholes? Now, you may be able to draw a picture to work this out. But it could look like this, couldn't it? Here are 3 wholes. We've cut them up into halves. So if we say how many halves are there in these 3, the answer is 6. So we've done a couple of divisions by drawing pictures or by trying to work it out. But now we're going to think about how this is really working and whether there's a kind of method that we can use. So a half divided by a quarter. Well, what we realise is actually if we turn this number upside down, if we turn the second fraction upside down, half times 4 over 1, it gives us the answer. So 1 times 4 is 4, 2 times 1 is 2. Basically, dividing is like multiplying but turned upside down. This is called the reciprocal, when you turn a fraction upside down. So a half divided by a quarter equals a half times 4 over 1. 1 times 4 is 4. This is how we multiply. 2 times 1 is 2. And then we can cancel this. 4 over 2, divide both of them by 2. Gives us 2 over 1, which is 2. So now we've got a method. So let's go back to 3 divided by a half. We've written it as 3 over 1 divided by 1 over 2. That's the same as 3 over 1 times 2 over 1. Multiply the top numbers, gives us 6. Multiply the bottom numbers, gives us 1. 6 over 1, which is 6, which is the answer we got by drawing pictures. 3 over 1 divided by 1 over 2 is 6. So in general, we write this as a over b divided by c over d equals a over b times d over c equals a times d divided by b times c. So let's just do some examples now, just to solidify what we've learned and just to practice what we've learned. So 23 over 6, this is an improper fraction. We're going to write it as what's called a mixed number, a whole, a number of wholes and a fraction. 23 over 6. So 6 goes into 23 3 times. You get 3, and then we've got 5 left over. 3 and 5, 6. What is 5 over 6 times 3 over 10? So this would be quite hard to draw as a picture, not impossible, but be quite hard. 5 over 6 times 3 over 10, so we multiply the tops, easy peasy, 15. Multiply the bottoms, 6 times 10 is 60. 15 over 60, and then again we cancel down. We look for something that goes into 15 and 60. The answer, of course, is 15 goes into 15 and 15 goes into 60. We can divide them both by 15. 1 over 4. We could have actually taken this in 2 steps. So we could have divided by 5. 15 divided by 5 is 3. 60 divided by 5 is 12. 3 over 12. And then we could again divide them both by 3. 1 over 4. So we could have taken it in steps. It's a matter of taste, really. Also, some people actually cancel down within the multiplication. So some people will say, well, we can divide the top and bottom there by 5. 1 over 2. divide the top and bottom here by 3, 1 over 2. So you end up with 1 times 1, which is 1, over 2 times 2, which is 4. So there's just different ways of doing it. But that is a correct way, is to actually cancel within the multiplication. Okay, 3 over 8 divided by 4 over 5. Again, this is pretty hard to do as a picture or do from sort of common sense. But our method works really well, of course. So we turn this upside down and then change it into multiplication. 3 over 8 times 5 over 4. 3 times 5 is 15. 8 times 4 is 32. 15 over 32. We can't cancel down. There are no common factors between 15 and 32. 2/5 divided by 1/15. Actually, I think we can just work this out without using the method. Because actually we can sort of say, well, 1/5 divided by a 15th is going to be 3, because there are 3/15ths inside a fifth. So 1/5 divided by 15 would be 3. So 2/5 divided by 15 is going to be 6. But let's do the method. We can use the method. So 2/5 divided by a 15th. 2/5 times 15 over 1. We get 2 times 15, which is 30. We get 5 times 1, which is 5. And then we can cancel this down. So what goes into 30 and 5? 5 does. Which leaves us with 6 over 1, or just 6. Which is what we worked out. Just sort of reasoning instinctively. So I really hope you've enjoyed this. If you have, then please do press the like button. And if you'd like to see more in the future, please hit subscribe and hit the notification bell. I was speaking to my daughter and she wants me to do quadratics next. So factorisation, completion of the square, quadratic formula. So those will be coming up in the future, along with just algebra in general. I really hope you enjoy your mathematics and I really look forward to seeing you next time.